The Middle East remains on edge, waiting to see if the war will resume in the days ahead. Overnight, President Trump taking to Truth Social with a new warning for the regime. He said for Iran, the clock is ticking and they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them. Time is of the essence. The president's post comes as reports indicate the Iranians have submitted a revised proposal to Pakistani mediators aimed at addressing some of the gaps in their previous response that President Trump described as a piece of garbage.
Did he? Well, Trump continues issuing threats toward Iran as peace efforts have so far failed. The most recent news, though, is that he was planning to strike Iran again kinetically as soon as Tuesday of this week, but has since said that he is postponing his scheduled attack. We'll explain his reasoning behind that and more in just a moment. But first, Cenk, it's unclear how reigniting kinetic war with Iran will accomplish a damn thing, but what are your 2 cents?
Yeah, so most important thing here is, as always, are we going to restart the war and when? So Trump is now saying we were going to do it tomorrow. Is a weird thing to say, but he says we're not doing it anymore. Is that even true?
Exactly.
So we'll talk about that. But one of the things we want to show you here is how the Israel First crowd is pumping up the war. Right. So that's going to be pretty evident. Let's hear the details.
Well, as you heard from Trey Yingst, Iran shared its latest peace offer or negotiation terms to the Trump administration. They sent it to the United States through Pakistan, which is kind of mediating these peace talks. However, a Pakistani source, probably to be diplomatic, said that both sides keep changing their goalposts. Now, Iran has been very clear and unwavering in what they demand. So I don't know exactly what they're referring to, what the Pakistanis are referring to when they say that Iran is moving the goalposts. That's why I say I think this was just meant to be diplomatic and not put all the blame on the US side. But the US certainly has moved the goalposts multiple times. So for example, the US first said that Iran cannot enrich any uranium at all, including for medical reasons or energy purposes. Now the US is apparently showing some flexibility on enriched uranium. What? But at the same time, they're saying that they refuse to ever unfreeze all of Iran's assets. They would consider unfreezing about 25% of Iran's assets in later phases of the peace talks. Additionally, the US will not pay reparations for war damages caused by the US and Israeli militaries, and they refuse to lift sanctions on Iran ever. Why would Iran agree to that, especially after the US and Israel have lost this war? Over the weekend and into today, Trump has issued more and more of his signature unhinged threats toward Iran, including in a statement to Axios, which reads that Trump said that the US will hit Iran much harder than before if they don't come up with a better proposal. The clock is ticking. They better get moving fast or they are not gonna have anything left, Trump stressed. So another threat to just wipe out Iran from the map, I guess. But in response to Trump's threats, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman, Ismail Baqai, says that Tehran is continuing to pursue diplomacy with seriousness, but the Islamic Republic will not be subdued by contradictory behavior and threats from the opposing side. We are fully prepared for every scenario. In the event of any reckless action, we will respond with full strength, and I assure you that our armed forces will definitely have new surprises for the enemy. And there were some mysterious attempts over the weekend, in my opinion, to purposely escalate war. For instance, there was a drone strike at the UAE's Barakah nuclear power plant on Sunday. The drone attack damaged an electrical generator outside the inner perimeter, according to the UAE Defense Ministry. The UAE, by the way, hasn't officially blamed Iran for it. So we don't know if it was Iran. It could have also been, they think, Saudi Arabia. It could also possibly be Israel. We don't know yet. But Trump has said that he received a request from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE to hold off on attacking Iran. Apparently he was planning to do so tomorrow, Tuesday. And CNBC reports that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Keane should still be prepared to go forward with a full large-scale assault on Iran on a moment's notice in the event an acceptable deal is not reached. And just real quick, prior to this news coming out, Cenk, it's important to understand that the Iranians were expecting an attack by the United States. This is according to Trita Parsi and what he reports in his Substack piece. He says that Trump appears poised to reignite war with Iran. Press reports indicate that he will convene military advisors on Tuesday. Sources in the Iranian capital tell me they expect the United States to resume hostilities within the next 48 hours. And Parsi also highlights how much of a loser move this is, and I wholeheartedly agree with his analysis here. He says, quote, "We should first recognize that restarting the war amounts to an admission that Trump's previous escalatory gambit, the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, of course, has failed. That in turn was itself an admission that the war had failed, which was an admission that the threats of war in January had failed. As I have argued before on my Substack, this relentless search for an escalatory silver bullet capable of bringing Iran to its knees is not unique to Trump. It has become a defining pathology of American Iran policy for decades." And so before we get to all of the devils that are outweighing the angels on Trump's shoulders when it comes to questions of peace and war, Cenk, what do you think?
Yeah, in a little bit, we're gonna tell you what the American voters think too, and it's not good. Is this a head fake because the Iranians knew the attack was coming on Tuesday? So we say, oh, we have decided not to attack them. That's totally possible, so the attack could be tomorrow. But if it's a real delay, he's saying it's because the Gulf countries don't want us to attack. That's weird because just a couple of days ago, I was in a debate where the Israelis were saying, oh, we would only want to redo this war because Saudi Arabia and UAE want us to do it. Apparently not. Oh, the Israelis lying. That's got to be a first. You know the hardest part of starting TYT? It wasn't being on camera because I'm pretty, let's be honest. Or trying to figure out this new thing called YouTube. Yeah, sure, that was hard. But one of the hardest things, believe it or not, was launching our merch store, Shop TYT. I didn't know the first thing about starting an online clothing store. But thankfully, I had the best business partner to help me out. That's Shopify. You need a beautiful online store? Shopify's got hundreds of ready-to-use templates that match your brand style. You need to find customers? They make it super easy to run email and social media campaigns wherever people are scrolling online. And what about managing inventory, processing returns, and international shipping? Shopify is your commerce expert. They handle the world-class logistics so you don't have to. Everything from payments to analytics is in one place. No more jumping between platforms. It simplifies your life so you can focus on what you actually started the business to do. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/TYT. Go to shopify.com/TYT. That's shopify.com/TYT. But now that gets us to the main event here, which is the Gulf countries don't want this war, the American voters don't want this war, Iran doesn't want this war, Europe is having gas issues, Asia's having gas issues, shortage issues, inflation issues. None of them want this war. So it is literally the entire planet versus Israel. So the rest of the planet does not want the war, and Israel does. And Anna thinks it's 100% likely that Israel will beat the world and get it exactly what they want, no matter what anyone else on the planet wants. I have it at about 95% chance. And
what's giving you optimism? Tell me about that 5%, Cenk.
Yeah, and the reason why, Anna, is because I constantly double check myself, quadruple check myself. So I sound confident on air, but I'm constantly rethinking. Is it true? Do the facts match my perspective and the pattern? And so what I'm given pause by is, even though I think the markets are crazy, they appear crazy to me, they're absolutely convinced that there's almost no chance of war.
Who's convinced?
The markets. right?
I know, but the markets are insane and are not really a good indicator of reality.
I hear you, I hear you. That's why I don't have it at 50-50 or anything, but they have it 95-5 or 100-0 that the war is not going to restart. So
can I tell you what, I had a conversation with a Wall Street analyst, okay, who I just happened to know personally and ran into the other day. And I was just curious what his thoughts are on the markets versus what's happening on the ground with this war in the Middle East. They're convinced that we have powerful people within our country right now and people in the Gulf working around the clock to find an alternative to the Strait of Hormuz.
No, but that's not wrong. They are doing that.
They are doing that, but there isn't one. He's convinced, remember, he's a Wall Street analyst.
Right.
He's convinced that the alternative exists, they're working on it, and we're gonna have the free flow of oil and gas before you know it.
So why do I only have that at 5%? Okay, you can think about it that way. The reason why I have that as such a low probability, but not impossible, is because yes, there are people, smart people all across the world working on an alternative. In fact, they have a discussion of a U.S. Bahrain deal that they're trying to get votes for in the United Nations. So it's not like people aren't working on it, and it's not like the entire world isn't against restarting this war. They are. That's why the markets and reasonable people look at it and go, I mean, the entire world wants this war to be over. So obviously it's gonna be over. And what they're wrong about is, no, the influence of Israel is greater than the rest of the world's influence combined. Now, since this is such a stark difference, and you see we're at 95 to 100% that Israel is politically stronger than the rest of the world combined, and the markets say, no, we're crazy, and no way the rest of the world, Israel, that sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory. Israel's a tiny little country. The world is obviously a billion times stronger. So now you're gonna get to see with your own eyes who is right and who is wrong. And so don't tell us that Israel doesn't control anything if we're right about this.
But also, guys, the other thing to keep in mind is it's not like, I mean, get crazy conspiracies or things like that out of your head, because there is no conspiracy. It's happening right in front of you, right? Israel isn't like magically hypnotizing people. Like, that's not what's happening here. Israel understood that they can buy our politicians. The United States remains a superpower. The United States remains a military superpower. However, because of our relationship with Israel, our influence internationally, globally, has been decreasing, right? Because now you have countries that we have launched economic warfare against through sanctions, working together to find loopholes to the international financial system that the United States and the Western world relies on. And so when you talk about the BRICS countries, they're growing in influence and power. I know Americans in the Western world wants to deny that, but it's just the truth. So when it comes to Israel, it's not like there's something super spooky at play. No, they're buying our politicians and they're doing it out in the open. I mean, that's all it is.
And what we're about to show you, because they also are all over American media, and what they set up is this fake version of reality where Israel is a beloved friend and victim, and the Palestinians and the Iranians, etc., are all murderous terrorists, etc. So that's why when I tell you about my trips to Washington, because they live in the other reality, and so they also think we're crazy, and they think, oh no, the war's not gonna continue. It doesn't make any sense to continue. Literally, no one wants it to continue other than the Israelis. So they've drank their own Kool-Aid, thinking the Israelis don't have that much power. Even as almost every member of the Republican Party, minus Tom Massey, votes with them. And whenever they need it, any Democrat they want votes with them every single time, because most of the Democrats are also bought off by the Israeli lobby. They see that reality and they go, no, they told me on cable news and in the New York Times, that's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. So I'm going to ignore the evidence of my eyes and ears, even though we could, as Anna pointed out, literally all see it on TV.
Well, ignorance is a choice if that's what you choose to do, but the reality is the reality. The other aspect to this is, I mean, if you're being blackmailed by a foreign country because they have videotapes of you doing some pretty disgusting and potentially illegal things, is it gonna be easier to pressure you to go along with what the foreign country demands? Just asking, just a question to ponder on just for a little bit. But let's move on to the people who are in Trump's ear right now, because it's important to know who's influencing him, and more importantly, it's important to do pattern recognition when it comes to the pro-Israeli talking points, because they love to roll them out and they all love to say the same things at the same time. Why don't we start with Senator Lindsey Graham, who was on Meet the Press this past Sunday?
So what happens next? I think we hit a wall on deal making. I would encourage the president to look at reducing Iran's military capability even further. They've been dramatically weakened, but there's still targets that could weaken them more militarily. And I would also keep the embargo on to weaken their economy. And I'd let the Iranians know, if you keep terrorizing the region, KARACHI Island, which is your source of revenue, will be in play. I think it's going to be very difficult to get a deal with the current regime. Is there any evidence they've changed? I talked to the CIA director yesterday. Is there any evidence that the crowd in charge now is any less committed to destroying Israel, going after us, the great Satan, purifying Islam? I think the answer is no. The energy infrastructure is their soft underbelly. If you go back to the fight, I'd put energy on top of the list.
So you're calling for strikes on the energy infrastructure, Senator?
I'm calling to hurt this regime.
Okay, so there you have it. Senator Lindsey Graham would like your gas prices to increase further by limiting the global oil supply and targeting Iran's oil infrastructure. By the way, Iran has made abundantly clear that if their oil infrastructure or if their civilian infrastructure is attacked, they will retaliate by attacking oil and gas infrastructure in the Gulf states, which would be a global disaster of epic proportions. But Cenk, your thoughts?
Yeah, so when Israel puts out a talking point, they all say it at the same time. So Rick Scott, Senator of Florida, came out and said the same thing as Lindsey Graham. Keane, a former general, now a sellout trader to this country, working for defense contractors and probably for Israel, said, we got to attack now. And another talking point they're all putting out at the same time is, the longer we wait, it's a campaign of deception and delay for the Iranians. And my guess as to how they came up with that talking point is Israel was like, hey, we should do a pretend ceasefire where we keep bombing them, just like we do in Gaza and Lebanon. And that way that could be a campaign of deception and delay for us. Oh, that's a good idea. Why don't we say the Iranians are doing what we're doing, deception and delay? Why don't we say the Iranians are doing what we're doing? Oh, they could have weapons of mass destruction like we do. Oh my God, they're terrible terrorists that kill innocent civilians like we do. So that's probably where the talking point came from.
Of course.
But the reason that they say that is because they're like, don't delay Donald Trump, don't delay America. Oh, that is only helping Iran. No, you have to attack right now, exactly when Israel orders you to attack.
So Trump also had a phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday, and we can all assume that that phone conversation had to do with pressuring the president to reignite kinetic warfare against Iran. And then to your point, Cenk, you're absolutely right. In fact, we have a video of General Jack Keane on Fox News, kind of giving the American people a glimpse into what to expect now that the only people who seem to have the president's ears are individuals like him. Take a look.
Where are we? The president has exhibited a huge amount of patience here since the ceasefire on April the 8th. And we've tried to work a deal with these guys, and it just doesn't seem possible. And where we are, we're on the cusp of going back into military operations. When we stopped, Bill and Dana, we had 2 weeks to go, a little less than 30% of the targets. Those targets remain, but we have better intelligence now after these 5-6 weeks. So that target list is expanded. It's considerably more comprehensive. It'll be a combined operation with the United States and Israel going full throttle, all out, no half measures here whatsoever. And when those target lists are complete, and they will consist of the rest of the weapons that are remaining, to indicate some of what you just mentioned, to include what remains of nuclear.
Unbelievably ridiculous. Look, my favorite part of that video was the B-roll that they're playing, the footage they're playing right beside General Keane, which shows all these Iranian women without headdresses on. Shocking, right? You would think that they're all like wearing head to toe head coverings, like you can't see anything. Anyway, Cenk, these people are lunatics, and it's amazing that that's a general, because as he knows, there is no way to win this war militarily. But he's gonna go for it anyway. He's going to give the president this kind of advice anyway, just setting him up for failure. And Trump is stupid enough to use that advice.
Yeah, so look, we definitely didn't want this war. We definitely don't want the war to continue. We think it's an epic disaster. So that is 98% of the story. The 2% silver lining is if Trump does what the entire planet is not expecting, right? The markets aren't expecting, no one is expecting, and he does what Israel orders him to do, reignite this war, the collapse will be so epic that Trump will be completely done politically, and the Republican Party will be in absolute tatters. So it doesn't matter how unpopular the Democrats are, and they are still very unpopular. The Republicans now are becoming so deeply unpopular that they're almost unelectable. The gerrymandering that they did might actually hurt them because they now have districts that are a little bit less safe. And now things are swinging in double digits. So let me just give you some American voter data because it's relevant to this. Right now, congressional ballots that were close to even for a long time, even though the Republicans kept sinking. Well, the dam is broke. Now the Democrats have an 11-point lead in a congressional ballot, generic one. And guys, context for that is not small. That is in that type of polling is a gigantic lead because different races have a lot of variability, but the overall Democrats versus Republicans in the congressional ballot racing doesn't have a lot of variability normally and almost never gets to double digits. So the Democrats having a double-digit lead is amazing. Only 32% of Americans think that we're on the right track. Disaster. 3/4 of independents are against Trump now. Only 32% say that we're going in the right direction. 28% say that they approve of Trump on affordability. 28%, largely driven by the fact that the war has driven up all these costs. And let me give you one graphic here. Do you think Trump's decision to go to war with Iran was the right or wrong decision? Americans in general have it at 30% right direction, 64% wrong direction, which is disastrous. He's down to 70% support on the war for Republicans, and I've never seen Trump that low with Republicans. And among independents, he's down to 21% approval on the war. Kiss those congressional elections goodbye. If he restarts this war, it could be an epic landslide like we haven't seen in a long time in 2026. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.